Alrighty, folks, it is great to have you here with us for another adventure here with Theologic. It's exciting to have the Thinklings podcast along with us today here, joining us via Zoom. We're happy to have you. I'm Zach Patke.
Sean Mustian. I love books. I love reading, so I am very excited for this interview.
Why don't we get started today? And I want to ask some questions here. Would you guys over at the Thinklings, we'll start with Andy, then we'll have Charlie, and then we'll have everybody on our podcast knows Tim Little at this point because we had him speak over in November about Song of Songs. And so if you would be willing... What's that?
Shalom.
Shalom.
You
right?
speak about the Song of Solomon often, Tim? That seems like a pretty rare thing for you, right?
Come
on, Tim. Give us a horrendous Tim. Come on.
It's not horrendous. It's beautiful. What are you talking about?
I am beautiful. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that.
That's his word over at Thinklings. Wait, so didn't somebody make something for you, Dr. Little? Didn't somebody make you something that said had a picture of you that said horrendous on it?
Andy was a co-conspirator in that, but I have a little sticker that says horrendous.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
So one of our listeners...
Can we get a quick backstory on that? I mean, I don't want to take too much of your guys' time with introducing and such, but what's the backstory to this horrendous?
I think Andy should start it since he was part of the conspiracy.
So as long as I've known Tim, and it's been a long time, I mean, even way back when he was a Hebrew professor for me, I think he was using horrendous. Maybe it wasn't as much back then.
Yeah.
But it's just always been his word. That's just
I stole it.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter at this point. Who did you steal it from, Tim?
Jeremy Estrema.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know Jeremy Estrema.
He graduated in like 01, 02.
Yeah.
But I've been saying horrendous since, for the last 20 years. So now everybody just thinks of me as horrendous, but I actually stole it from him.
All right. So as we introduce ourselves, we know who the horrendous one out of the three is. So Andy, would you? No, just kidding. Would you introduce yourself? Maybe talk a little bit about your family. Talk about what you do at Faith, and a little bit about Thinklings as well.
Sure. My name's Andy Stearns, and I'm a professor at Faith Baptist Bible College in the Bible department. I teach. I'm kind of like the kid who's got his fingers in all the holes trying to keep the dam from bursting. So
you're the jack of all trades.
I am, and I'm not a master of any of them, that's for sure.
Whatever.
So, I like that when I said I'm not a master of any, Charlie shook his head vigorously in an affirmative support of that. So I'm just gonna...
You're the Bible study guy.
Oh, well, that one I'm a master of. I really enjoy that. So I teach Introduction to Bible Study, which is probably my favorite class to teach. And then I also teach the first year Greek course, Greek 1 and 2. I also teach Western Civilization 1 and 2, which is like a history of Western civilization, as it sounds.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. It's a newer course for me. I've only been teaching it for 3 years. In the spring, I teach Apologetics and Worldview, Christian Experience, and then I have a number of Bible electives that I teach from time to time, and a couple of seminary electives. But most of those I'm not teaching them at the moment because I'm trying to get a doctorate started again. So I'm married to my wife, Robin, and we have 2 kids, and they are 8 and 5 years old, about to turn 9 and 6 years old in February. And they are energetic. That's what I would say. They're energetic.
Charlie, tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Andy, do you have a word like Tim? He has
I don't think I have
What's
a
your
word. I don't think I have one, do I?
I don't know. I was just trying
Charlie
to think about
has a word.
I don't think I do.
Do I have a word?
You have spicy.
Spicy is my word? I guess I do say that every now and then.
He does say, like, he's said that before, that spicy. I don't know if it's as much as horrendous, but...
No. But
yeah. Anyway, so Andy, I don't know what your word would be if you had one, but...
I don't think I have a word.
I just know that Andy likes coffee. I know people tease him a lot. Don't they draw... you put pictures on Facebook of people drawing on the marker board of different, different things to kind of pick on you.
Yeah, they do. They like to pick on me. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Well, I remember when I was in your first college class and I asked for permission to call you the Nard Dog because your name is Andy, like the character from The Office, and you told me
the Nard Dog
that I could not call you that.
Now, can you then tell them what you chose as your Greek name just to spite me? Now, understand, I'm a new teacher. I don't even know Charlie. And I'm like, who is this guy?
It's like
he
wants
to
call me.
Glorious year of 2011.
11, yeah. 10 years ago.
So yeah, you wouldn't let me call you Nard Dog. So then I, as a joke, was like, well, my Greek name is going to be Nard Dog. And you said, no, it has to be a word in the Bible. And so I poured myself over the text and found there is, in fact, a Greek word used in the New Testament, nard.
Yeah, right.
Like
yeah.
the spikenard of
Right.
the ointment that the woman broke at Jesus' feet.
Yeah.
And so my Greek name became Nardu, because that was the closest what's the word I'm
Word to the
looking
nard
for?
dog.
Declension that I could get to nard dog.
Yeah, we have a word for all of this too. It's called horrendous.
And I'm glad you mentioned it, Tim, because I did carry that title over into my Hebrew and Aramaic classes. So I've been known as Nardu in many courses at Faith. So
In Hebrew,
anyway,
it's nerd.
yeah, that's how you pronounce it, but it's not your name. So anyway, so hi, my name's Charlie, and I am the dumbest of the three Thinklings, if you can't tell from what I've already talked about. I'm the online director at Faith, and if you know what that means, please let me know, because I'd love to figure that out. And I teach adjunct at Faith as well, and most of my teaching is in the local church program. We have a discipleship emphasis, and so a lot of my courses focus on personal and then corporate levels of discipleship. So how does God sanctify you personally, and then how do you help other people in their own sanctification? And so right now I'm teaching a class, discipleship of youth, so focusing on teenagers. And then we have a different course for each age designation. We have discipleship of children, discipleship of adults. We have a administering discipleship course that I teach. And so that's kind of the flavor of every one of my classes is discipleship. But then I also have the class that is intended, I think, in the curriculum to follow Andy's Intro to Bible. So he has Intro to Bible Study, and then I teach Principles of Bible Teaching. And so I take what Andy has taught them and then ruin it all and like tear it all down and teach them how to eisegete the text and find meaning in their own emotions, and it's great.
Horrendous.
They love it. So
Horrendous is the word.
Isn't
that's a little bit about me.
Aren't you working on some kind of a publication or something about discipleship?
Yes, there is a book that is a manuscript is finished, a discipleship book, and we're, I think, wink, wink to Tim over there, I think we have a way to publish it, but maybe we don't.
We're going to figure it out.
So stay tuned. And then I also officially do have an editor for that now. So, which I don't think Tim and Andy both knew about that update. So
no, that's
have
awesome.
An editor, have a schedule for the spring.
Sweet.
And so hopefully maybe next summer, next fall, have a book that actually maybe gets published. So that'll be fun. The working title, 12 Discipleship Questions. Again, it's personal discipleship flavored. So help you personally grow, but then also intended to be used with other people to help them kind of engage in that process too.
One question for every one of the apostles.
Yeah.
Amen.
Oh.
That is exactly why I chose that number, because
you could name one.
Can't have
chapter
11.
You can name one
Can't have
chapter after
13.
each one.
Yeah.
I want to read the Judas chapter.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was thinking. How about a Judas chapter?
I did think about, because I give it to students, and I thought about telling them there's 12 chapters, and then one of them is like, "Oh, I'm just kidding. This one dropped out. He's not there anymore. Like, had some issues. He's gone." But that's, anyway.
Oh, well. Yeah. All right. Tim.
Yeah. So my name's Tim Little. I teach at Faith Baptist Theological Seminary mostly. And my classes are Hebrew grammar, Hebrew exegesis, Song of Songs, Ecclesiastes, Aramaic, Old Testament classes. I do teach one discipleship class. So discipleship is a major emphasis of our podcast, as you even see just with the three of us being some class that we teach. So that's a little bit about me working on a book, Song of Songs for Singles. Website's now live, songofsongsforsingles.com. You can follow us there or on Facebook or Instagram. Things are constantly changing. Even this week, I've had a couple of contacts concerning getting the book published, something we're really pursuing right now. Song of Songs is something I studied a lot. I'm speaking on it at a few churches, and the Midwinter Couples Retreat, the IARBC's Midwinter Couples Retreat. If you're interested in attending, it's in February. And we'll be doing 4 sessions. So 3 or 4? I don't know.
Yeah.
Something like that on the Song of Songs. So Song of Songs for singles, Song of Songs for married couples. That's kind of a big focus. But yeah, it's a little bit about me. Married, 5 children. Kids range from 14 to 7, 8, something like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Hard to keep all the ages in line, right? Who's what?
They're
what
constantly
age?
changing.
Yeah. That's right.
Horrendous.
It's horrendous. It's hard to put together. Well, for our listeners, we did want to let you know that if anybody is down in the Des Moines area or the Ankeny area at the end of January, beginning of February, they have Refresh Conference coming up. Very useful for pastors and those who are in ministry to go and be refreshed, go listen to good preaching, go and have the Lord bless you through conversations with other fellow pastors and whatnot. If you want to get into that, faith.edu, check out faith.edu and go look and search for Refresh Conference. Sean and I are going to be down there during that time. We're going to have a table. So when we get there, we would love to meet you. And of course, the Thinklings would be interested in meeting you as well if you've had a chance to connect with their podcast by that time. So we're grateful for that. Looking forward to that as well. Okay, tell us about the Thinklings podcast. What is it about? What do we need to know? Let's talk about that.
The podcast was Charlie and Andy's idea, and I have been along for the ride for the last 3 years.
Very
Has
fun.
it really been that long? Yikes.
It has, Charlie. It has. I was thinking about that before the interview. This has been a long time.
3 years. Oh wow. Cool.
Well,
So how did that get cooked up? So what did that first conversation look like when Charlie and Andy were making this dream?
Well, it was
Well,
more of
It was
us
actually
hanging
Charlie.
out.
Okay, it was Charlie.
Well,
Okay, so Tim said it was Charlie and Andy. Now Andy says it's Charlie. So Charlie, I guess the question is to you: how did the Thinklings get started?
There you go.
well, so I think the correct answer is all 3 of us.
Yeah.
Now it's all 3. It's like the Trinity here.
Yeah.
It's like,
So all 3 of us, we had been meeting for a while, and I don't think had any thought of having a podcast, and we just I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but as we were recording this, that week that we're recording this was our 111th episode. And so we kind of celebrated that like the hobbits would from Lord of the Rings and the 111st birthday. And it's kind of
Shooting off
crazy.
fireworks and
Oh yeah, we did all of that
All
in
that.
Tim's office earlier. It was great.
then you just
And,
disappeared by putting the ring on, right? Okay.
Well, I haven't put any rings on.
Charlie.
I haven't done that yet.
Charlie needs a ring.
Charlie's got the ring.
But
He's
so
even got a cup that says he's got the ring.
Oh.
I do have
One cup to rule them all.
Yeah, it's right here.
Mr.
It's
Horrendous
the
over there.
3 of us as I have a blurred screen. I don't know if it even shows up. but
Censored. Okay.
It's the 3 of us. It should be censored because one of us is smoking.
Oh, boy.
I'll let you guess which one of the 3 is smoking that pipe. But so all that to say, it's kind of crazy to think that we've had that many episodes. But before we even thought about having a podcast, we were collectively doing what we hope our podcast encourages, which is we were trying to be creative and work on some reading and writing projects together collectively. And I had the great benefit of having both of Tim and Andy as professors. And so I had grown through their teaching ministry. And then together we would get together, talk about books we're reading. And Tim and I I think maybe the first true beginnings of this, Tim and I had picked, Andy jumped in and we started trying to, write little short stories here and there, or like poems or something creative. And all of that was sort of to emulate the Inklings, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and Owen Barfield, all those guys from across the pond, way back in the day, and just try to encourage each other to produce and to be diligent at reading and learning. And then I think somewhere in that process, we had a discussion, and I don't have any idea what that initial one was, but we thought, man, this is what some of our students need to hear.
Right.
And so we I think originally thought about, well, why don't we like find some guys that we're mentoring or discipling and just invite them to our live meetings that we're having. And that did happen a couple of times.
Yeah.
But then somewhere along the way, and I'm not sure if I was the one that brought it up first or not, but we thought, if we could record these and put them out as a podcast, it would definitely reach more than just one or two that we're inviting. And then one summer it was just like, well, let's do it. And here we are a couple years later and still enjoying it, having fun. And honestly, I think the greatest benefit has nothing to do with episodes you've produced or even some of the episodes that you think are actually good. I think the three of us, our friendship and our relationships in the Lord has deepened as a result of this.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then I can just say, I have benefited from my two friends and what they've studied. And like, I've learned more about Bible study in Greek, and I've learned more about Hebrew and the Old Testament and the Song of Songs than I would have ever learned on my own. And so I think that's the real benefit of what we've tried to do is that collaborative endeavor to grow mentally and spiritually has been really fun.
So a couple more elements of the story to add. We had called ourselves the Thinklings for 3 years. We would get together and do this stuff. And I remember it was Charlie actually who got the idea to make it a podcast because he sort of pitched it to me. And I think he may have pitched it to Tim. I don't know who pitched it, but it was his idea.
Rolled my eyes. I probably just rolled my eyes originally because I wasn't a podcast listener. And so I was just like, whatever. So it was really like you two that were hammering it out.
But his idea is good. It's like, hey, we could do this and we could put it out there for other people. And I remember at one point we were trying to decide like how to make it work. And we were really thinking of the formatting and what to do. And Charlie said something very perceptive. He said, guys, we just need to put a mic down and love what we're doing. It's something like along those lines.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's really true. And I would echo what Charlie said. And I would say even to your listeners and hopefully our listeners, that there is something to be said for a committed long-term study group that you're going to do that and your lives are going to collide whether you want it to or not in good and bad ways. And it's really good for your growth.
Oh, that's really exciting. I mean, I think as I'm listening to what your guys are saying, you guys are 3 years into it. Sean and Zach and I are about 9 months. It's you grow closer to each other, and it's a really neat connection. And Sean is different in his theological persuasion.
I'm different. Yeah,
he's different than I would be. And you learn to appreciate, even if you don't believe and agree with some of those things, you learn to appreciate where they're coming from. And it's an encouraging thing. It's really cool to join those things together. All right, let's get started talking about the point of this whole thing here. So let's talk about this. I have a question to talk about reading. Your podcast is about reading. I'm in Northwest Iowa. I'm a pastor in Northwest Iowa, and I gotta say, as I think about my own congregation and those around, reading is not one of the most exciting things for people to do. They would rather get a YouTube video. Or they might read if it's something of interest. But get a YouTube video, listen to a podcast, or what have you. So in the digital age where we're in, videos are everywhere. My question to ask you, as you guys are prolific readers, why read a book? And why be so diverse in your reading as you already are?
Am I diverse in my reading?
It sounds like, because I've listened to you guys, and it's like, so one that I was listening to, Dr. Little, you were reading I think it was like Peter Pan or something. I don't know if I remember.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so it's
I
like
read to my kids.
Yeah, so it's like you bring out, not just in your podcast, you don't bring out just theology books. You bring out all different kinds of books to talk about. Like we should start doing an interview like that, and I'll just bring out Winnie the Pooh or something and just kind of see how our listeners respond to that.
Yep.
But yeah, any thoughts on that, gentlemen?
Well, I think part of our goal in our podcast is to help people to want to read, because I think we identified amongst the three of us, part of why we got together for the 3 years previous to getting recordings done is that we were trying to push ourselves mentally, biblically, spiritually, theologically. And part of that is to consume good things and then to produce good things. And if there's no external press to do that, you default to like entertainment. And it just seems like so many, especially college students and teens and whatnot, or you're just sitting there flipping on your phone all day long. And that's entertaining in the sense of like Neil Postman's amusement. You're not really thinking too hard.
Right.
And then the fruit of that is I think you're more easily able to be blown around from every wind of doctrine. I think you're more influenced by what's outside of the Bible. And so part of the goal is we're trying to push ourselves and thinking if we do this as an example, we may be able to help people see how beneficial and interesting and fun this is. So I would say a part of the reason you want to read is you're trying to help your brain or your thinking, let's say it that way. You're trying to help your thinking to grow and strengthen so you can be a better thinker for the Lord. So Doug Wilson, I know he's like a pariah right now. No one wants to be associated with him.
I like Doug Wilson.
We like Doug Wilson.
I like Doug Wilson.
We like Doug Wilson. I understand he's got problems and all that.
Post-millennialism, he has one of them.
Yeah, Patke just told me something about Wilson a few minutes ago before we started the recording. I was like, no, Wilson, you're off on that one. But generally speaking, I love Wilson.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like Canon Press's whole the Christian nationalism book and Neil Shenvi and the whole thing, like it's a big issue right now.
I was not aware of that, Andy, and you texted that to us, and that is hilarious.
It is nuts. Like it's crazy. Anyways, that's probably a whole nother topic.
But we'll bring you back on for a different interview.
Yeah, that'd be good.
He has a book called Wordsmithy on how to write. And it's one of my favorite books. And in it, he says you should read until your brain creaks. And the point is that sometimes you try to read and you're not very good at it and you don't understand what you're reading and your mind hurts and you think you're failing. He says, no. That's good. It's like breaking your brain and making it bigger. It's like when you break down a muscle. And he says reading is more like a muscle. Your mind is a muscle, not a warehouse. You kind of have this idea that you're going to fill it up and it's going to get full. And he says, no, think of it more like a muscle. You're exercising it. Yeah. And so that's part of why you want to read is to strengthen your mental muscle. And yet you should ask the question, who gave you that mental muscle? And that's part of the other reason you want to read. If God has equipped you mentally to think, and there's a lot of scriptures that talk about meditation and thinking and dwelling and setting your mind, then reading is probably one of those ways that are very, very helpful. I've got more, but Tim's got his hand up. Tim, why don't you go?
One of the first books that we read together was Habits of the Mind by James Sire.
Oh, yeah.
And he talks about how the mind is a muscle. The second book that we read was, what was the guy's name? Certeange or something like that.
The Intellectual Life.
Certeange. Yes.
So
is he French guy?
Loves that book. Yeah, French.
Oh, it's so good.
But all of these books kind of just talked about how, just like what Andy was talking about, literally, but also the spiritual component of it. A lot of times people don't look at reading as something that's spiritually healthy. They're like, well, I read my Bible, so we read my Bible. Yes. And we always, in our podcast, always have a section on the book, the Bible. That is the book that they need, that we encourage reading and studying, but also how these books themselves help even foster Christian virtues, chief of which Habits of the Mind, James Sire talks about, is humility, which is a major issue within the academy, a major issue within our churches. When you're reading, it kind of it illustrates just how much you don't know. I teach Hebrew and Aramaic and these different languages, and people are like, wow, you just know so much. Well, I know that we don't know a lot.
Right.
The deeper down the rabbit hole you go, the more you realize that we're just guessing at a lot of stuff. Now, some of those guesses are pretty educated guesses, but still there's a lot that we just really don't know. And so it encourages that component of humility, realizing, you know what, I really just don't understand. I don't have a sharp mind, but then not leaving you in despair and just saying, I'm stupid. You're not stupid. Okay. You can really grow and accelerate in that understanding by just persevering. And what is that? That's Christian virtue. That's endurance and the patience that you learn and grow through. So there's a lot of benefits to reading besides the knowledge that you would acquire from the actual book. And this is one of the things we banter around about audiobooks and digital ebooks and paper books and all of that. There is a component where you should read a paper book. You can read ebooks, and I listen to books on Audible, and I'll read ebooks. Okay. But there's something about reading a paper book that has a different cognitive function that builds into another conversation with Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. The medium affects the message. So as you asked your question, that was kind of where I went. Habits of the Mind, one of our first books, The Intellectual Life by Sertange. And just try to encourage people to just read. Start simple and then push yourself. And the best way to push yourself to read even deeper is to do it in a group, which is what we found out. You literally just read the book out loud and then talk about it and pick something that you don't understand or that's difficult. And that's what we would encourage your listeners to do too, is to pick a book, read Habits of the Mind, read it. It's not going to be an easy book, and read it with people, and push yourself.
Yeah, so they both use this illustration of the mind as a muscle, and I really like that. But I'm gonna quote someone or refer to someone that they maybe don't. I've gotten away from talking about him, but he deserves to enter the chat here. So one of Lewis's earliest and more profoundly influential friends was Owen Barfield. And he has an illustration for to be fair, he's talking about poetry, not just reading in general. But I think the illustration serves for all types of reading, that there are two things that happen when you read. And the first is like when a magnet goes through a coil, and there's a generation of that field, that magnetic field, as you're reading. And that's illustrative of just like the cognitive, something happens when you're reading and thinking and mulling over thoughts. And I think that's even heightened in poetry because you have to think deeper to understand what the poetry is doing.
Yeah.
And so he would look at that magnet in the coils, and there's something like sparks are happening. And so there's a very in the moment benefit to that mental activity. And I think it is very similar, going back to the muscle for a moment. You go and work out and you do feel better. There's a physical benefit to it. There is an initial mental benefit to challenging yourself to read. And I think that's a great illustration of what is happening internally. Is like there's that magnetic field being produced with the magnet and the coil. And I think that's a great illustration. But then he also says there's something that happens to us that's more prolonged over time as we, again, he's talking about poetry, but I think it would be true of all reading, as we digest written material and think, and those sparks of that field go off daily as we read things. There's an expansion of who we are. And I don't know if he uses the word soul. I think he does. But that our soul slowly expands. And I don't think he means soul in a theological way, like my unseen spirit, soul, whatever that is. I think he's looking more at the inner man aspect. So what expands is my affections and my perspectives and things like that. So to actually become a much deeper and rich and virtuous person as I read over time. Yeah. And I would say those are two benefits that you can't ignore with reading. That if you really want to develop in some higher quality of virtue, reading does that. It doesn't do it instantly. Like you don't read a page and then like, boom, you have it. But over time, as you interact with profound and the great ideas of our civilization, you as a human become a better human. And I know that doesn't always theologically line up with what we think of sanctification, but I do think that happens. And then there's something that can't be replaced in the moment, where that mental activity stimulates and drives us and motivates us. And so that was kind of where I went with the thought. And it's interesting, you guys kind of got there with that muscle, but I really like his magnet in the coils illustration, and to think over time as you have those sparks flying that you actually do become a different person when you think on a deeper level.
There's a book that I just read recently. It's called Why Johnny Can't Preach. I don't know if you ever, it's a really, have you read that one?
No, I've heard of it though. I
Yes.
want to. Al Mohler did a podcast on it like years ago, and
Yeah.
it sounded very interesting.
Yeah, it was really good. One of the things that he talked about why so many pastors in so many different denominations, and obviously he doesn't know regular Baptists, because I couldn't really see this as necessarily applying to many, but maybe for some, is partially because people just they don't read, they don't admire, as Charlie's talking about, poetry. They don't admire verse. They don't appreciate the way words are conveyed on the page, so that you can become a better preacher and to speak, not to be eloquent so that people don't understand you, but to be appreciative of language and to be considerate of the words you use as you proclaim the message. So I guess that's a quick book that as you guys are thinking about reading, that's a really good one. It's fast too. It's like maybe 5 different chapters. But that's a highly recommended one on that topic. So you guys have bantered around the idea of audiobooks and things like that. Where do you stand on those things? I'm kind of curious, as Tim mentioned, that audiobooks, and it sounds like you can listen to them, but any more thoughts on that?
Charlie doesn't have any thoughts on this.
No, he hates audiobooks.
I try not to think
ebooks.
in general, but we all,
Horrendous.
so I'll speak for all three of us because we have talked about this multiple times. We all use audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
We all use, at one time or another, or Kindle books, and we all obviously have physical books. So none of us are like purists that we don't actually utilize some of those things.
It's a good word, purist.
I think it depends on how you're using it or the goals you have with the material. I love listening to narrative books as audiobook, especially if they have good voice actors.
Yeah, fiction.
Yeah.
What's the actor's name who played Gollum in The Lord of the Rings?
Andy Serkis.
Andy Serkis.
Yeah.
He has a couple of Tolkien works, audiobooks where he has voiced things, and they're phenomenal. Actually, I think he might have done a Screw Tape Letter audiobook
Yes.
too. And they're absolutely phenomenal. And I think there's where you get back to that line of, am I at that point actually listening to it just to be entertained? Is that my goal there? And it will achieve that goal because they're fascinating and they're well done. Or am I actually trying to think through what the point of that work was? And I think that's where you have to be discerning, is how are you employing the audiobook versus the actual book?
Yeah.
And just to realize that I think you'll get something out of all of the modalities, but you'll get different things. And so
for
you probably won't grasp the concepts as well from an audiobook. That would be my standpoint.
So as an example, to read a systematic theology versus listening through a systematic theology, the reading of it, you're going to glean a lot more than listening.
Oh, absolutely. Because what I was just talking with a student today, and it's not really the same thing, but it applies. So like an accelerated program, an accelerated curriculum where I had to do 4 years of college, graduate college. And then if I wanted a Master of Divinity, I had to do 3 more years. So it's 7 years. Most colleges and seminaries, you can get both of those things now in 5 years. And you've just subtracted 2 years. And that to me is when you can grab an audiobook and I don't have to read it at my pace of my own thinking. I can speed it to double the time. And did I still hear all the words and get through all the material? Absolutely, I did. But to think you're going to grasp the same things when you take 2 years out of a program or you blitz through a book at double the speed, if you think you're getting the same product at the end, I think you're fooling yourself. And so that I would be aware of that aspect of an audiobook too, that, and I did this with a book that I deeply love and cherish. The Wingfeather Saga, the first book, I thought it developed so slowly, I couldn't handle it any slower of a speed than 1.8. And I love the books, but I think, and I have gone back and read them on a physical book, and I got way more out of it when I actually read it. I think it moved me in deeper ways and I think it gets back to the pacing maybe.
I read the Lord of the Rings on Kindle. I have all three on Kindle. So I'd read it straight through. And this has been 6 or 7 years ago, I think. I'd gotten through them. And it was good. It was really good. But and I love my Kindle. Okay, so I got it right here. I love it. I read on it. But it's kind of like looking through a periscope at a parade. And so you see the thing right there. There's something about with a book where you like see tracking like where you're at through it. And I'm not sure why this is, and it may have just been that I was reading it at night before I fell asleep, but I pulled out a paper copy of Lord of the Rings that I got. This would have been last year, and I read through the first book of the Fellowship, like there's book 1 and book 2 in Fellowship of the Ring. And it was a very different experience, but I read it in an unhurried manner while my kids would watch like Paw Patrol right before bed or something like that. And so maybe that background was like messing with it and all that. But it was a different experience. I'm not willing to say that the ebook experience was far inferior. But I've tried to listen to The Lord of the Rings multiple times, and the audiobook is really good quality, but it's 20 hours.
Yeah.
And finding Tolkien's doing so much more than just telling a fun story that I think I will, I'm trying to do the dishes, or I'm trying to mow the lawn, or I'm trying to do this. And then it's like a week and I get back and I don't know where I'm at. There's something about the mode or the medium that I would definitely agree with Charlie here. It's doing something different. And that's probably okay depending on what you're reading it for.
Do you let your students listen to an audiobook as as you assign books for them to read? Doesn't count then, huh?
I wouldn't allow it. No, I would want them to physically read it.
Okay.
I don't either. In fact, I'll even go so far as I've had students ask me, like, "Oh, hey, can I buy all these books early and like read ahead?" And I'll even tell them no to reading ahead, because I've paced the reading along with what we're doing in class. So if they just get the book and blitz through it, even if they're actually reading it over Christmas break, I still think they're not going to catch what I want them to catch. And so like, I think that pacing is really important. And, but also my biggest pet peeve about audiobooks, which I think everyone should use them. It's amazing. It's great, but you cannot listen to an audiobook and say that you read something, because that verb does not mean listen. It means read. And that just gets back to like being objective about what things mean. So like, and I know people, I have friends who are like, "Oh, I read this book. I thought it was really good." And I know they didn't actually read it. They listened to it 2 times speed in Audible. And every time I'm like, no.
If you're a listener and you're thinking, I want to start reading, and right now all you do is binge Netflix shows, and then you hear us say things about audiobooks, and you're like, well, I was going to try to get started on audiobooks and watching Netflix seasons. So don't misunderstand. But there's still a benefit for reading an actual paper book or an ebook. That's all we're saying.
And Proverbs 1:5, let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. When you're listening to a book, you're not able to pause, like what Carter's been talking about several times, to pause and actually process and think through what's really going on. In fact, the wise sages of old would speak in riddles. In fact, the Song of Songs is called Riddle of Riddles by at least one author. They make a statement that it's like the most enigmatic riddle. It's something that you literally have to think through. You've got to sort it out. And why is it that the sages of old wrote that way? Because God even values your mind and the development of the mind. So I would even just raise the bar a little bit on this whole idea of thinking, and then transitioning eventually to written books and reading things that are difficult. It's actually biblical. There is a biblical pattern that God wants to develop in your life, and reading is going to help you to do that. So audiobooks, fiction, okay? I can listen to an audiobook that is nonfiction when it's a topic that I'm already familiar and conversant with, because I know what to listen for. But if it's a topic that I'm not familiar with, especially if it's some kind of a deeper philosophical work, it's not going to work. Stearns and I both had a class where we had to read War and Key. The book was so complicated. As a professor, if I assigned that book to be read and somebody listened to it, I would laugh, because the whole point was for them to try to sort out the riddle of reading it. And those more scholarly, more difficult reading books are meant to be read and then thought about and quiz even each other on, like the sages of old.
Right.
I did try to read a book. I tried to listen to a book on epistemology once, not knowing anything about epistemology. It went horrible. So I would agree with Tim. If you know the material or if you're familiar with the subject, you could probably gleanings like gleaning from the field. But it's depending on your purpose.
Well, yeah, Andy, you recommended Alvin planning a book a few years ago, and I was like, oh, well, I'll get it and listen to it. And that's an apologetics.
Was it Knowledge and Christian Belief, that one?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I tried. It took like 15 minutes of an audiobook to realize this is not an audiobook.
Oh no.
Book, like you have to see the words that he's putting together and actually think through it. And like I was like, man, I'm kind of bummed. I just spent, however, I think it was like $10 or $12 on that audiobook, and you're not getting anywhere with that. But I do have it still. I could, on a long car ride, maybe you could take your time through it. But
so what are you guys reading right now? And how could you challenge our listeners when it comes to reading?
We had a guest on a while back, Kevin Bowder. Anyway, I'm pretty sure he said, read what you like.
Yep. That was
okay,
him.
good. And
yeah.
I do think, you're not helping yourself if you struggle to read and then you instantly jump into something that your affections are not stirred with immediately. Like if you have never cracked a theology textbook and you're like, I need to start reading, and I'm looking right in front of me, I've got Burkhoff's Systematic Theology underneath of my laptop. And if you're like, I'm going to start reading, and you grab like Burkhoff's Systematic Theology, you're done. You're getting nowhere. And so I think that was actually some of the genius of what Lewis was doing, was that he was writing things for children, but I also think he was trying to preserve some childlike, youthful part of him and his friends. And, Tolkien, he's writing something about hobbits and elves and dwarves. And, like, if that's what you're into, find something that is virtuous and wholesome and read that, maybe as a starting block. And, don't just try to jump into the deep end of what you might consider dull or boring. Like, find something you like, I think is really key. And, and then over time, I think you will, to go back to the idea earlier, I think you will see yourself expand. I think your tastes and your affections will cultivate over time, and where you maybe never had a taste for Bible study material or theology, or you never had any desire to study Song of Solomon, you might now be really intrigued with some of those things. And it's just, taking probably I don't like to quote Bill Murray, but there's this movie, What About Bob? And his character, there's this, his character's crazy, and he's meeting with a psychiatrist, and the quote is baby steps. It's like baby steps, baby steps, baby steps.
Yeah, better take a smaller book.
Like,
right?
Yeah, like don't think you have to solve all the problems with your reading in one day. Find something you like that's simple and in front of you that's doable, and just take baby steps. And you'll look back and I never thought I would have. Honestly, I never thought I would have read probably most of what I've read at this point. There's things now that deeply intrigue me that I don't understand why I own them. Like, I know why I own them, because now I do have some weird affection to them. But like the Odyssey and the Iliad, the Aeneid, like some of those classic works, if you would have talked to me like 5 or 6 years ago, that would have been as far off my radar than a wife, but, it's, I don't know why you,
Horrendous.
How that happens over time is pretty interesting, but.
Yeah, I would encourage for on that same thought, and I would use the metaphor of like an ultra marathon. So I'm not a runner, as you can tell by my physique, because you guys can see me on the screen. But an ultra marathon, if I'm correct, it's like 100-mile run, I want to say. Even if that's not it, let's just pretend that's what it is. If today I decided I wanted to do one of those, I could go sign up for one that's tomorrow and I could get on the starting line and go. There's absolutely no way I'm going to do it. And then if someone says, "Hey, have you ever run a marathon?" I'm like, "Well, I tried one and failed, so I quit." But I didn't do any training ahead of time to prepare for that. And so if there really is a muscle element of reading, then sometimes when you, maybe even as an adult, realize, I should be reading more, we're saying pick something that's easy and pick something that you like. And sometimes I really honestly think if you haven't read, you just need to go even easier than you think. And so that's where like reading something like Wing Feather or The Green Ember or Narnia or, Tolkien, like some sort of a narrative, a fiction story would be good. And then ask your pastor for a recommendation of a Christian living book. And there's a wide variety of those that are very technical or more girthy. And then there's some that are just easier and more simple. And I really think that probably finding the easiest possible book you can start with and starting there, it's kind of like a couch to 5K idea. If I never ever run, then I should at least start walking around the block once a day. That might be where I need to start. And so sometimes your listeners, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, man, I really need to read more. It may be that when you started too high. And if you've done this before and you're like, I tried to read and I failed, it may have been that you overshot it and you just didn't realize it. So getting some counsel from someone at a book that might be more your level, and that could could be good because it could inculcate humility, because when your pastor hands you, well, here's a book called See Spot Run, that might be good for your humility. So I would say that pick something low. And then the other thing I would say as an encouragement is, I really enjoyed Habits of the Mind. I had to read it for a PhD program class a long time ago. And then after that, we started reading it as the group of the Thinklings, and reading through it was slow, but it was really good. You get 3 paragraphs in and Tim, what does that mean? And Tim explains it, or Charlie has this thought, or I'm saying this. And so sometimes having the community of reading is really a really good tip there.
Yeah, that community component is actually, I'd say, one of the most important parts that's going to help you to read, especially if you're really struggling. So if you have a friend or two and you say, you know what, I really just want to start reading more. Hey, you want to do that with me and get together at a schedule that's going to be doable for you. So I have another reading group and we get together 3 times a year. So we read the book in advance. Well, most of us read it. Some of us don't get through it, but then we get together and we fellowship and we talk about the book. And that's a really positive peer pressure pushing you method of going about it. Now, it might be that you could do it every other week or once a month. Do some kind of a schedule that's going to help you. So that's one of the things we really try to emphasize with the Thinklings. And I would agree with all of the things that these guys have already said. And then I'm just kind of giving you a couple other tips. One other thing that we do in our house is with the kids, there's no media on Sunday afternoons. So they can take a nap. We always tell them quiet time. We just call it quiet time. So they're in their beds and they can read or they can sleep. And then when they get up, they can continue reading or play with their toys or whatever, but no media, no screens, none of that. And that's also something that I try to live and exemplify as the dad. So I get up from my nap and I'll go down and I'll sit on the couch and I'll pop open a book and I'll sit there and I'll read. And so I would want to just kind of encourage the fathers that are listening, who encourage you to read and try to even read visibly. It's a good example that you can set for your kids. And I recognize you might not be a reader. You just be like, I just don't read. That's okay. Just like what these guys said, pick something easier, something that you're interested in. It doesn't have to be Christian. Carter likes hunting, get some kind of a hunting book or something that interests you, and then read and then try to progress. And that's the last thing I just want to highlight. Don't just get stuck reading the easy stuff. Push yourself. A group is what's going to help you to push yourself to go deeper. So one of the things we were talking about, what are you reading right now? The book, the one that I at least had here was On Feminities in the Song of Songs and Beyond, The Most Beautiful Woman. It's a book connected to the Song of Songs and a study of the character, the female character, in the Song of Songs. And the author is arguing for how she's a multifaceted character. It's not one person, it's multiple people, which is interesting. I have some correspondence with that, but I think that the author is wrong on a few points. It's a more intellectual kind of a book. push yourself to read. But I would never recommend this book to somebody that's not familiar with the study of the Song of Songs. That's not where you start. You start with like a magazine article, okay, or an online article of a topic, like a Wikipedia article or something. They're called tertiary sources. So then you have a little bit of familiarity with the topic, and then you start going deeper, and you just start crawling down into that rabbit hole. And so push yourself, start and then push yourself.
Yeah, I guess I never said what I'm reading right now, and Tim's right. I have some really weird. I don't know if they're weird, but they're tastes that have nothing to do primarily with theology or, So I'm looking at a book right now. It's Bradleyville basketball, but the subheading is the Hicks from the Sticks, and it's a weird conglomerate of I do love sports, and I do love the outdoors, and it's like a historical. Pretty much didn't have a basketball team at this high school, and then they built a gym and they built this program and they hired this coach, and they had a lot of success. I think they won like 67 or 68 games in a row, and the Hicks from the Sticks, like all of these kids are like backwoods coon hunting like farm boys, and they kind of attribute their success to their work ethic and their humility. And I heard about it on another podcast, and I was like, man, that sounds super interesting to me. And so that's a book that I'm reading through, and that's as light can be. We're talking about basketball, we're talking about coon hunting, and I like that. And so that's something that I'm just looking at right now, right in front of me. And I have a lot of things like that are not very academic at all, and that's a good place to be.
Yes, so I guess I'm reading a number of books right now, and I think probably like all of us, I would assume you guys is the same thing. You got your fingers in a number of different books.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
so actually, one of them. So I'm reading through. I haven't read much in this lately because I've got these other ones I'm working on. But A History of Western Philosophy and Theology by John Frame, and I'm like 2 chapters through. I think I'm 3 chapters into it, and I teach Western Civ. And so part of the reason I got it from the publishers, I wanted to like see if it could be something I could use to supplement some stuff. But your interview with Brian Jansen was awesome, guys.
Oh,
like that was phenomenal. And then he said that he is using it as a Sunday school for 3 years in his church. And I thought, man, that would be an interesting way to do it, just because a lot of the way Frame is going through it is he's working through theology throughout the ages. And I think that's something good for us to know about. So anyways, I just want to bring that up because I thought your guys' interview with Jansen was awesome.
That's high praise.
Philosophy.
It's awesome. That's awesome.
No, it was, I couldn't stop. I was trying to get through the whole thing. So anyways, that's one of the ones I'm working on. The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis is another one. We're going to do an episode series on that in the spring.
I guess we're all supposed to be reading that one.
Yeah, actually, all 3 of us are currently reading it, even though none of the other 2 had. I'm sure they are.
I've not started.
I've read like the first 5 pages.
I read it like 2 years ago.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So he'll listen to it this time.
Horrendous.
The Meaning of Marriage by Tim Keller. That's been very interesting. Man, it's bad. If you're a selfish person, that's a bad book to read. Don't read it, guys. I think you should read it. The Hobbit. I started The Hobbit again, and I don't know if I'll even finish it. But
my son's reading that right now.
Oh man, I got a really nice copy from the Faith Bookstore. It's like illustrated. It just calls to you. And then currently,
I just watched the movie, so I don't think I'm going to need to read the book.
Good.
Horrendous.
All 3.
Whoa.
Oh, that hurt my soul.
Listener, if you could see Charlie's face, I'm pretty sure I saw the fault lines where his head was.
Okay, you know what? I was just talking with someone.
Oh boy, here we go.
Okay, you got me onto this. This is not my fault. I did not do this. But when we talk about reading, and there's also movies made of this book.
Terrible movies.
I cannot emphasize enough why you might want to read the book first.
Yeah.
Like it's gonna. You can't undo once you've seen something. And Tim, you even talked about this on our last episode, where your first interaction with the Lord of the Rings was primarily the movies, and you were so surprised when you read the book. You're like, "Wait, this is a completely different thing."
Yeah.
Right.
And
Hobbits even more.
Oh yeah. So I have a friend who I will not name, but I've received now multiple updated DVDs that he has somehow on Reddit found these people that have cut out all
The fake
of the
parts.
non-book material,
Yeah.
and then spliced it back together, and it severely shortens the Hobbit trilogy that they made, but it actually conforms to like what you would find in the books. And I've watched through it, and it's actually, it was such a joy. Like
Yeah.
none of this like weird Hobbit elf romance. And anyway,
It's like, did they leave anything out that had to be added in? So I was just thinking, like, if they left a section out of somebody coming and just like, all right, I'm going to read this part of the book that was missing from the movie, and then you'll get to the real,
That would have been funny.
That would have been hilarious.
That's a good question, because obviously, like I've interacted with it enough where I might not notice something like that. But if someone who's never, like, I just was talking with someone yesterday who's never read Lord of the Rings or seen the movies. And I was like, oh, this is a gold mine of an opportunity. I'm like, okay, you do not watch those movies until you read the books. And, they probably won't, because no one ever, listens to recommendations like that. But I don't know with the cut up Hobbit, if it left things out, or I thought it was a pretty good representation of the book flow.
Yeah.
And then they even took, talk about a digression. My goodness. They took all the like I almost said Dumbledore, of Gandalf when he goes to like seek out this necromancer. They make that its own little file. So they don't even put any of that in there. So it's really true to the Hobbit text, which, as more of a purist, I really appreciated their attempt. And it's definitely not legal, so I can't consent to anyone watching it. But
my wife is a big Lord of the Rings fan, and so I found a YouTube channel. We've been watching it at night. It's called Nerd of the Rings. Have you ever found that one? And he goes through all the different lore. I just watched one on who Tom Bombadil was, and or the different ideas of where he could have come from. But anyway, that's a digression as we talk about.
I'll apologize for the digression. I made the movie comment. So
there you go.
Hey, I love digressions like this, but what I know is happening in the mind and heart of Tim right now is that he is like
he knows.
Smog in his big
desolate
pile of gold, just fuming, like he doesn't like this. And but anyway,
it's all good.
Charlie is the king of digressions and the king of segues to those digressions.
Charlie is the one that
Tim is like the one who pulls him back, and Charlie like stretches Tim. It's wonderful.
Well,
it's really good.
This is the inscription in Owen Barfield's book Poetic Diction, and he dedicated that book to C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
And he said, "Opposition is true friendship."
Mm-hmm.
So I think we
that's right.
We're true friends at times.
We are.
Yeah, that's good.
We are.
Any other concluding thoughts, gentlemen, that we want to say by way of encouraging our listeners, and at the end of that too, just let everybody know where we can find you. The Thinklings podcast. I think they can Google you, but
it's 2023 is coming up, a new year.
Yes.
So just some thoughts for encouraging reading over the course of the year.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Make a plan.
Yeah,
make a plan. Okay.
It is incredibly helpful to put a plan together. Like these are the books I'd like to read, and kind of think through when's your free time. Like put it on the calendar. Set up some notifications so you get a ding on your phone. Like, hey, put your phone down and read this book. And that the New Year's comment made me think of that. That is actually really helpful to have a plan.
And with that idea of plan, there's an app I would plug. It's called Bookly. And you go in there, you put in the ISBN number for the book, and then you enter your page number every time you're done reading. So it keeps track of your reading, and also it times you, which I found that to be helpful in concentration. So that my daily goal is in any book, 20 pages a day. And so I put that in, and okay, I'm just going to focus in on the book because I know that timer's going. And so it just keeps me focused, and then I get done, enter the page number, and move on with the day. But that app was called Bookly.
Yeah.
I'm downloading it right now. That looks awesome.
It is.
Brilliant.
I love it.
That's cool.
Brilliant.
As far as where they can find the Thinklings podcast, we do have a website, thinklingspodcast.com, but we should be available in all the major podcast apps. So Apple, Spotify, there's a handful of other Google podcasts, and it kind of bounces out to a lot of other places, I think. But most people are Apple or Spotify people, and so you can find us there. And yeah, if you're ever on campus, come find us. There's a chance you could pop into the bookstore, and Tim might be there.
Yeah.
And Andy and I, our offices are in the Domicos building. And during normal business hours, you can pop into those buildings, and you could ask someone at one of the visitor desks and say, "Hey, we're Andy and Charlie's office. You could pop in and see if we're here." And we'd love to see you when you're if you're on campus. And we do have when we first started out, we got coffee mugs, and we got a whole bunch of coffee mugs sent to us that had an error, and so we're still trying to give away all of those error mugs, and I still have 3 in my office currently. So if you pop in and I'm here, I will give you a mug that was printed slightly off. So
an errant mug. I wonder if it'll be worth something someday. I don't know.
Maybe
worth something.
They're really valuable when you need to drink a cup of coffee, because you can put coffee in them. They hold it really well, and then they're pretty good at that. As far as anything else, probably not.
And Tim would say horrendous.
You got it. That's what I was thinking. Exactly.
Well, gentlemen, I look forward to seeing you all. Sean and I will be down at Faith in January. We'll probably run into you then, and invite everybody to tune into the Thinklings podcast, and of course ours. Thanks so much for joining us during this time.